Flann thought upon the princess Flame of Wine. He walked through the town after the king's son had ridden after the enchanter, without noticing anyone, until he heard a call, and saw Moog standing beside a little tent that he had set up before the bull's field. Flann went to Moog and found him very disconsolate on account of the loss of the horse he had brought into the town. "'Tis a bad town to be in," said Moog, "and unless I persuade you yourself to become partners with me, I shall have done badly in it. Join with me now, and we'll do some fine feats together." "It would not become a king's son to join with a robber captain," said Flann. Fine talk, said Moog. He thought that Flann was jesting with him when he spoke of himself as a king's son. "I want to sell 3 treasures I have with me," said Moog. "I have the most wonderful things that were ever brought into this town." "Show them to me," said Flann. Moog opened one of his packs and took out a box. When he opened this box, a fragrance came, such as Flann had never felt before. "What is that smells like a garden of sweet flowers?" said Flann. "It is the rose of sweet smells," said Moog, and he took a little rose out of the box. "It never withers, and its fragrance is never any less. It is a treasure for a king's daughter, but I will not show it in this town." "And what is that shining thing in the box?" "It is the comb of magnificence. That is another treasure for a king's daughter. The maiden who would wear it would look the most queenly woman in the kingdom, but I won't show that either." "What else have you, Moog?" "A girdle. The woman who wears it will have to speak the truth." Flann thought he would do much to get the rose of sweet smells or the comb of magnificence and bring them as presents to the Princess Flame of Wine. He slept in Moog's tent and had a peep of day, and at the peep of day he rose up and went to the house of hospitality where Dermot and Donal were. With them he would go to the king's orchard, and he would see, and perhaps he would speak to, Flame of Wine. But Dermot and Donal were not in the Brufors. Flann wakened their grooms, and he and they made search for the 2 youths. But there was no trace of Dermot and Donal. It seemed they had left before daybreak with their horses. Flann went with the grooms to the gate of the town. There they heard from the watchman that the 2 youths had gone through the gate, and that they had told the watchman to tell the grooms that they had gone to take the world for their pillow. The grooms were dismayed to hear this, and so indeed was Flann. Without the king's son, and without Donal and Dermot, how would he go to the king's garden? He went back to Moog's tent to consider what he should do. And first he thought he would not go to the festival of the gathering of the apples, as he knew that Flame of Wine had only asked him with his comrades. And then he thought that whatever else happened, he would go to the king's orchard and see Flame of Wine. If he had one of the wonderful things that Moog had shown him, the rose of sweet smells or the comb of magnificence, these would show her that he was of some consequence. If he had either of these wonderful things and offered it to her, she might be pleased with him. He sat outside the tent and waited for Moog to return. When he came, Flann said to him, "I will go with you as a servant, and I will serve you well, although I am a king's son, if you will give me something now." "What do you want from me?" said Moog. "Give me the rose of sweet smells," said Flann. "Sure, that's the finest thing I have. I couldn't give you that." "I will serve you for 2 years if you will give it to me," said Flann. "No," said Moog. "I will serve you for 3 years if you will give it to me," said Flann. "I will give it to you if you will serve me for 3 years." Thereupon Moog opened his pack and took the box out. He opened it and put the rose of sweet smells into Flann's hand. At once Flann started off for the king's orchard. The steward, who had seen him the day before, signed to the servants to let him pass through the gate. He went into the king's orchard. Maidens were singing the song for the time of the blossoming of the apple trees, and all that day and night Flann held their song in his mind. The touch of hands that drew it down kindled to blossom all the bough. Oh, breathe the wonder of the branch and let it through the darkness go. Youths were gathering apples, and the Princess Flame of Wine walked by herself on the orchard paths. At last she came to where Flann stood, and lifting her eyes, she looked at him. "I had companions," said Flann, "but they have gone away." "They are unmannerly," said Flame of Wine with anger, and she turned away. Flann took the rose from under his cloak. Its fragrance came to Flame of Wine as she turned to him again. "This is the rose of sweet smells," said Flann. "Will you take it from me, princess?" She came back to him and took the rose in her hand, and there was wonder in her face. "It will never wither, and its fragrance will never fail," said Flann. "It is the rose of sweet smells. A king's daughter should have it." Flame of Wine held the rose in her hand and smiled on Flann. "What is your name, king's son?" said she, with bright and friendly eyes. "Flann," he said. "Walk with me, Flann," said she. They walked along the orchard paths, and the youths and maidens turned toward the fragrance that the rose of sweet smells gave. Flame of Wine laughed and said, "They all wonder at the treasure you have brought me, Flann. If you could hear what I shall tell them about you. I shall tell them that you are the son of a king of Arabia, no less. They will believe me because you have brought me such a treasure. I suppose there is nothing more wonderful than this rose." Then Flann told her about the other wonderful thing he had seen, the comb of magnificence. "A king's daughter should have such a treasure," said Flame of Wine. "Oh, how jealous I should be if someone brought the comb of magnificence to either of my two sisters, to Bloom of Youth or Breast of Light. I should think then that this rose was not such a treasure after all." When he was leaving the orchard, she plucked a flower and gave it to him. "Come and walk in the orchard with me tomorrow," she said. "Surely I will come," said Flann. "Bring the comb of magnificence to me too," said she. "I could not be proud of this rose, and I could not love you so well for bringing it to me, if I thought that any other maiden had the comb of magnificence. Bring it to me, Flann." "I will bring it to you," said Flann. He was at the gate of the town when the King of Ireland's son rode back on the slight red steed. The king's son dismounted, put his arm about Flann, and told him that he now had the whole of the unique tale. They sat before Moog's tent, and the king's son told Flann the whole story he had searched for. How a king traveling through the mist had come to where Druids and the Maid of the Green Mantle lived. How the king was enchanted, and how the maiden Sheen released him from the enchantment. He told him, too, how the enchanter was changed into a wolf, and how the wolf carried away Sheen's child. "And the unique tale is in part your own history, Flann," said the King of Ireland's son. "For the child that was left with the hags of the long teeth was no one else than yourself, for you, Flann, have on your breast the stars that denote the son of a king." It is so," said Flann, "and I will find out what the king and queen were, my father and my mother." "Go to the hags of the long teeth and force them to tell you," said the king's son. "I will do that," said Flann. But in his own mind he said, "I will first bring the comb of magnificence to Flame of Wine, and I will tell her that I will have to be away for so many years with Moog, and I shall ask her to remember me until I come back to her. Then I shall go to the hags of the long teeth and force them to tell me what king and queen were my father and mother." The King of Ireland's son left Flann to his thoughts and went to find the Goban Sair, who would clear for him the tarnished blade of the Sword of Light, and would show him the way to where the king of the Land of Mist had his dominion. Moog spent his time with the ballad singers and the storytellers around the market stake, and when he came back to his tent, he wanted to drink ale and to go to sleep. But Flann turned him from the ale pot by saying to him, "I want the comb of magnificence from you, Moog." "By my skin," said Moog, "it's my blood you'll want next, my lad." "If you give me the comb of magnificence, Moog, I shall serve you for 6 years, 3 years more than I said yesterday. I shall serve you well, even though I am the son of a king, and can find out who my father and mother are." "I won't give you the comb of magnificence." "I'll serve you for 7 years if you do, Moog." Moog drank and drank out of the ale pot, frowning to himself. He put the ale pot away and said, "I suppose your life won't be any good unless I give you the comb of magnificence." "That is so, Moog." Moog sighed heavily, but he went to his pack and took out the box that the treasures were in. He let Flann take out the comb of magnificence. 7 years you will have to serve me, said Moog, and you will have to begin your service now. I will begin it now, said Flann, but he stole out of the tent, put on his red cloak, and went to the king's orchard. "Oh, Flann, my treasure bringer," said Flame of Wine when she came to him. "I have brought you the comb of magnificence," said he. Her hands went out, and her eyes became large and shining. He put the comb of magnificence into her hands. She put the comb into the back of her hair, and she became at once like the tower that is builded. What broke its height and turned the full sunlight from it has been taken away, and the tower stands, the pride of a king and the delight of a people. When she put the comb of magnificence into her hair, she became of all kings' daughters the most stately. She walked with Flann along the paths of the orchard, but always she was watching her shadow to see if it showed her added magnificence. Her shadow showed nothing. She took Flann to the well in the orchard and looked down into it, but her image in the well did not show her added magnificence either. Soon she became tired of walking on the orchard paths, and when she came to the gate she walked no further, but stood with Flann at the gate. "A kiss for you, Flann, my treasure bringer," said she, and she kissed him, and then went hurrying away. And as Flann watched her, he thought that although she had kissed him, he was not now in her mind. He went out of the orchard disconsolate, thinking that when he was on his 7 years' service with Moog, Princess Flame of Wine might forget him. As he walked on, he passed the little house where the Spey woman had her besoms and heather stalks. She ran to him when she saw him. "Have you heard that the king's son has found what went before and what comes after the unique tale?" said she. "That I have, and I have to go to the hags of the long teeth to find out who my father and mother were, for surely I am the child who was taken from Sheen." "And do you remember that Sheen's 7 brothers were changed into 7 wild geese?" said she. "I remember that, mother." "And 7 wild geese they will be until a maiden who loves you will give 7 drops of her heart's blood to bring them back to their human shapes." "I remember that, mother." "Whatever maid you love, her you must ask if she would give 7 drops of her heart's blood. It may be that she would. It may be that she would not, and you would still love her without thought of her giving 1 drop of her blood of her little finger." "I cannot ask the maiden I love to give 7 drops of her heart's blood." "Who is the maiden you love?" "The king's daughter, Flame of Wine." He told the Spey woman about the presents he had given her. He told the Spey woman, too, that he had bound himself to 7 years' service to Moog on account of these presents. The Spey woman said, "What other treasures are in Moog's pack?" "1 treasure more, the girdle of truth. Whoever puts it on can speak nothing but the truth." Said the Spey woman, "You are to take the girdle of truth and give it to Flame of Wine. Tell Moog that I said he is to give it to you, without adding 1 day to your year's service. When Flame of Wine has put the girdle around her waist, ask her for the 7 drops of her heart's blood that will bring your mother's 7 brothers back to their human shapes. She may love you and yet refuse to give you the 7 drops from her heart, but tell her this, and hear what she will say." Flann left the Spey woman's and went back to Moog's tent. The loss of his treasures had overcome Moog, and he was drinking steadily, and went from one bad temper to another. "Begin your service now by watching the tent while I sleep," said he. "There's 1 thing more I want from you, Moog," said Flann. "By the eye of Baelor, you're a cuckoo in my nest. What do you want now?" "The girdle of truth." "It is my last treasure you'd be taking me." "Is it my last treasure you'd be taking on me?" "The Spey woman bid me tell you that you're to give me the girdle of truth." It's a pity of me, said Moog, but he took the box out of his pack and let Flann take the girdle. Flame of Wine saw him. She walked slowly down the orchard path so that all might notice the stateliness of her appearance. "I am glad to see you again, Flann," said she. "Have your comrades yet come back to my father's town?" Flann told her that one of them had returned. "Bid him come and see me," said Flame of Wine. Then she saw the girdle in his hands. "What is that you have?" said she. something that went with the other treasures, a girdle. A girdle is like a belt for a woman. Will you not let me have it, Flann? She took the girdle in her hands. Tell me, youth, she said, how you got all these treasures. I will have to give 7 years' service for them, Flann said. 7 years, said she. But you will remember, will you not, that I loved you for bringing them to me? Will you remember me until I come back from my 7 years' service? Oh, yes, said Flame of Wine, and she put the girdle around her waist as she spoke. Someone said to me, said Flann, that I should ask the maiden who loved me for 7 drops of her heart's blood. The girdle was now round Flame of Wine's waist. She laughed with mockery. 7 drops of heart's blood, said she. I would not give this fellow 7 eggs out of my robin's nest. I tell him I love him for bringing me the 3 treasures of a king's daughter. I tell him that, but I should be ashamed of myself if I thought I could have any love for such a fellow. Do you tell me the truth now? Said Flann. The truth, said she. Of course I tell you the truth. Oh, and there are other truths. I shall be ashamed forever if I tell them. Oh, they are rising to my tongue, and every time I press them back, this girdle tightens and tightens, until I think it will kill me. Farewell, then, Flame of Wine. Take off the girdle! Take off the girdle! What truths are in my mind? I shall speak them, and I shall be ashamed. But I shall die in pain if I hold them back. Loosen the girdle! Loosen the girdle! Take the rose you gave me and loosen the girdle. She let the rose fall on the ground. I will loosen the girdle for you, said Flann. But loosen it now! How I have to strive to keep truths back, and oh, what pain I am in! Take the comb of magnificence and loosen the girdle. She threw the comb down on the ground. He took up the rose of sweet smells and the comb of magnificence, and he took the girdle of her waist. Oh, what a terrible thing I put round my waist, said Flame of Wine. Take it away, Flann, take it away. But give me back the rose of sweet smells and the comb of magnificence. Give them back to me, and I shall love you always. You cannot love me, and why should I give 7 years in service for your sake? I will leave these treasures back in Mohg's pack. Oh, you are a peddler, a peddler! Go from me, said Flame of Wine, and do not be in the town of the Red Castle tomorrow, or I shall have my father's hunting dogs set upon you. She turned away angrily and went into the castle. Flann went back to Mohg's tent and left the rose of sweet smells, the comb of magnificence, and the girdle of truth upon Mohg's pack. He sat in the corner and cried bitterly. Then the King of Ireland's son came and told him that his sword was bright once more, that the stains that had blemished its blade had been cleared away by the Goban Sayer, who had also shown him the way to the land of the mist. He put his arm about Flann and told him that he was starting now to rescue his love Fidelma from the castle of the King of the Land of Mist.